Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we will be discussing the Sharks' first preseason game of the year. Hockey is sort of officially back. Some people consider the regular season to be when hockey is back. Some people consider the first preseason game. For me, I don't value preseason games too highly, but it is nice to see the Sharks all back together here. And in their first preseason game, they ended up losing 4-3 to the Anaheim Ducks. However, as I said during the rookie tournament, the Sharks ended up going 3-0, but that really didn't matter. Preseason maybe even matters less than that. You could almost say the preseason has no impact on the regular season. We've seen teams go on to have fantastic regular seasons, win Stanley Cups, even though they've gone 1-5 in the preseason, let's say. And so the Sharks losing this game by a close margin to the Anaheim Ducks means very, very little. Onto the goals here. It was Timo Meier who started off, assisted by Joe Thornton. Then it was Brodzinski from Merkley and Heed. Then the Ducks got 3 goals for themselves. They made it 3-2. Blichfeld tied it up at 3-3, but then Max Jones with the game winner, and the Ducks held on for the last few minutes of that game. Now, taking a look at how some of these players performed, we'll start at the top of the line here. These were lines that seemed to play the majority of the time together. There was a good amount of juggling in this game, as you'd expect from a preseason game, trying to find some good synergy between specific players. So Meier, Sorensen, Meier, Suomela, and LeBanc started out together. Meier was potentially the best Sharks player on the ice today. I really liked what he was doing. He had a lot of creativity offensively. Him and LeBanc, although to a bit of a lesser extent, really looked quite strong. They were making a lot of things happen. Of course, Meier had the goal. LeBanc didn't get a point. But still pretty impressive to see from these two young players getting into the first preseason game, both of them on 2 new contracts. And so it could be a good omen going into the season. Suomela, on the other hand, their centerman, he wasn't as impressive. He was still okay. It's not like he was some sort of detriment to this line, but I would have liked to see a bit better. He sort of played at the same level that he was at last year, and of course last year he ended up getting demoted to the AHL, and so if he continues on this track, he may just end up in the same place. He needs to put up a bit of a better performance in some of his future preseason games. I'm sure because there's 6, he gets this first one, he'll likely be in at least 1 or 2 more. Next was a Sorensen, Thornton, and Brodzinski line. Thornton got put right into the preseason lineup right for game 1, probably just trying to get him back up to speed for the NHL. You want to get him back into a game, see where he's really at after a summer free of rehab, I guess you could say. From the past 2 off seasons, he's had to deal with a broken leg. He had both of those huge injuries, ACL, MCL, in each of the end of the last the 2 seasons, and so this was finally a year where he wasn't injured over the off season, so we got to see what he could do with that. He actually looked pretty good for the majority of this game. Of course, didn't get too much ice time because it's a preseason game. There's no reason to. But, very nice play to set up that Timo Meier goal, and in general, he looked pretty strong. Marcus Sorensen, he looked okay, not really much to say about him, but Brodzinski was probably a bit of a shining light here. He could potentially be a dark horse to fill a top spot in the top 6 role, as I have been speculating that could be someone like Shemelevsky or Chekovich to get that top 6 spot, or maybe they'll go a bit more safe and put someone like Sorensen, but Brodzinski looked pretty good. I thought he looked quite strong near the start of the game and then fell off a bit as it went on, but he scored a goal in this game. He was on and around the net for that first goal as well, the Meier from Thornton one, so he had an impact there, and so it could potentially happen. He's also not a rookie in the NHL. He has played about 60 or so games with the Kings, and so I'm sure DeBoer would appreciate that, to have someone, even though it's not a lot of NHL experience, it's at least he's played a game before, so he knows what to expect. He could be someone that from the start of next season we see playing with, let's say, Kane and Hurdle. Next would be a line full of rookies, Yurtakin, Gregor, and Blichfeld. Yurtakin was someone who I had my eye on during the rookie tournament. He had always seemed okay, never really enough to mention him, and I thought there were a couple of moments here in this preseason game as well where he looked pretty good. So there are some elements that could be there, but I don't know if there's definitely not anything to play this season, and it would probably be in a future season to see if your Taken would ever actually make the Sharks. There are pieces there, but I feel like he'd need to put it all together. Gregor still looked quite interesting. I still like his speed and his compete level, I guess you could say. He wasn't able to dominate as much as he was able to at times during the rookie tournament, as you'd expect, playing against actual NHLers now, or at least some NHLers from the Ducks. They were dressing players like Adam Henrique and Josh Manson. But he still looked pretty good, could still be a depth player as soon as this next season. I don't know if he'll be able to trump someone as like the fourth line center, someone like Goodrow or Gambrell. But, this season, maybe next season, he could potentially find a spot on the Sharks. Blichfeld, again, doing basically what he was doing during the rookie tournament, not doing too much, and then all of a sudden he gets a couple of opportunities and he gets very good chances. There was one, I believe, where he got a good pass from Ryan Merkley, couldn't bury that chance. The second one was another solid pass from Merkley. He ended up sniping that one. That was with his goal to make it 3-3. And so, as I said, I had compared him to Patrick Laine at the time. I will still do that. His shot not as good as Patrick Laine, although it is quite strong still, as we saw on that goal. But he's not necessarily a super impactful player who seems to be able to drive his line. You'd likely want to put him with good players, and I don't know if the Sharks are going to be doing that next season, but there is something there. Finally, the Sharks' last line in this game, Veal, Latunov, as well as Jake McGrew. Jake McGrew was impressive in the rookie tournament, not so much here tonight. Unlike Gregor, who seemed to transition decently well to the preseason, McGrew I didn't feel the same way about. He still looked okay, but I don't think he has as much of a chance to make the team as, let's say, Noah Gregor could have. Veal, like your Taken, was someone who I had an eye on in the rookie tournament. Again, not enough to mention him, but he made a couple of nice plays. I thought tonight he also made a couple of nice plays, but similar to your Taken again, not someone who really seems as much of a chance to make the Sharks within this year or even the next year. He probably needs a couple more, or he might just be an AHL player. Latunov was probably the most unimpressive Shark of the night. I didn't really see much that I liked about him, and I know that he was actually relatively high on the depth chart this past season, as maybe a couple more injuries and he could have potentially found himself at least up with the NHL squad. I don't know if that's still the same thing here this season, as this first preseason game didn't really give a lot of hope. Onto the defense, both Vlasic and Burns ended up playing in this game, which was somewhat surprising. I don't particularly care about evaluating their performance, as of course it's Vlasic and Burns. You know they're going to be in the lineup. You know they're going to get huge minutes, whether or not they were terrible in this preseason game or they scored 10 hat tricks. Now I'll move on to the other pairing, which is a bit more interesting, Carrick as well as Merkley. Now Carrick didn't particularly stand out in any which way. I was surprised to see him get a game here with Merkley. I thought they would put in Mario Ferraro, as that's sort of the duo that was put together in the rookie tournament when they played. But Merkley actually looked quite strong in this game. Still, obviously, some defensive lapses, some defensive issues, but he even looked better offensively. He was getting a lot more chances. Maybe that's just a product of playing with better players. There was one time where Merkley tried to connect with Meyer with this great pass that was sort of akin, for anyone who remembers it, the Erik Karlsson to Mike Hoffman pass back in the 2017 playoffs. Now, Meyer ended up knocking it down with a high stick, so it got whistled down, but it was almost a very, very nice play. Just the forethought for Merkley to even attempt to make a pass like that was extremely impressive. He factored in on 2 of the goals. The first assist wasn't particularly special, as it was just a shot to the net tipped by Brodzinski, but the next pass to Blichfeld was at least pretty good, and so it's nice to see him getting an impact on the board. So his offense was always quite strong in the rookie tournament. There were obviously a couple of moments, but I felt like it really shined in this preseason game, which was nice to see. Finally, I'll talk about Middleton and Heed. Both of these players had somewhat underwhelming games, which is a bit worrying for the Sharks, you could say. Tim Heed is, of course, penciled in to be the 6th defenseman for the Sharks, and Middleton, judging by how last year went on the depth charts with now no more Ryan, Middleton very well could have been the 7th defenseman penciled in, and so it was somewhat disappointing to see them both struggle here in this game. Finally, on to the goaltenders. It was Dell and Coronar who split the time, basically each getting half this game. Dell looked pretty impressive, which was nice to see, of course, since he is likely the backup going into this season. He only let in the 1 goal, the first goal from Shore. Coronar looked a bit shaky, especially right at the start when he came in. That goal from Delorier was quite unimpressive. He cleaned it up a bit as time went on, but still, it wasn't that great of a, I guess I should say 30 minutes and not a game from Coronar. And Coronar is actually likely the third goaltender on the defensive charts. If Dell really disappointed here in this preseason and wasn't looking good, Coronar would have likely been the guy to come up and be the backup for Martin Jones, if anything, although the Sharks would likely make a trade at that point. But still, it was somewhat disappointing to see Coronar not look as great as I thought he would have. But that will do it for this preseason review. The Sharks will actually be back in action tomorrow, facing off against the Calgary Flames in their second preseason game. Class dismissed.